Dr. Shernette Grant, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Leadership Plus with Dr. G. This is the podcast where we keep it real about what it takes to lead, grow, and inspire others to be their absolute best. And I get to be your host. And of course, as your host with the most, I would be remiss if I do not remind you to go back and check out all of the other previous episodes. Leadership Plus with Dr. G is available on all of your favorite streaming platforms: Spotify, iHeart, YouTube, Castbox. I know I'm forgetting one, Apple. So be sure to check that out. Today, I am so delighted to welcome the most amazing guest. I have known this amazing woman whom you will hear about in a few minutes because she's going to share all her stories with you. And I'm just so delighted to be sharing space and time with her today. I want you to help me welcome Dr. Nadine Wedderburn, who is the Associate Professor. Let me make sure I get this right, Dr. Wedderburn. She's Associate Professor of Social Sciences and Public Affairs at Empire State University in New York. Dr. Wedderburn, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. It's a pleasure to be here and to be spending some time with you this afternoon.
That's awesome. How's the weather up there in New York?
Not too bad. It is approaching spring. I don't think we're officially there yet. And it's actually raining today. So I guess a typical upstate New York kind of spring-like day.
Okay, we'll take it, right? We'll take it. We're getting out of winter and it's nice to have a little bit of rain and some sunshine. I'm definitely enjoying some rain today too. So I think we're both in the same boat.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, welcome. I'm so delighted to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you. And congrats, I should say, on the progress that you're making so far. You know how proud I am of you too, Dr. Grant. I've been following you for a long time. I have been cheering you on from afar in spirit and in truth. And and it is really, really heartwarming to see the journey that you're on and how you're just taking it, owning it, and making it great for yourself and for others. So thank you too.
Thank you, Dr. Nads. People will hear me refer to you once in a while as Dr. Nads because that's my phrasing for you. But for those, and maybe some of this will be a part of our conversation today. You're right. Thank you for your support. You are one of my biggest fans. I know this, and I don't mean that, with any level of arrogance. I just mean that with sincerity in terms of your support. I can call on Dr. Wedderburn any day of the week, and she will be there to help talk me through all of my mountains, right? And my valleys and get me over the hills. So I really appreciate you as well. Thank you for that.
Certainly. Right. And you're right. I am one of your biggest fans.
So Dr. Wedderburn, we're about to spend some time together. And before we get started, I didn't even introduce the topic today. Today we're going to be talking about agility and leadership agility, which, as you know, that's one of those topics that you and I bond greatly on. But before we get into all of that, can you just share with our audience, Dr. Nadine Wedderburn, who are you? How did you get to this point? And just share a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So I am a girl from St. Anne in Jamaica. That's where my journey began. And I have to name my parents. I am the daughter of Bing, may his soul rest in peace, and Dorothy Wedderburn. I grew up on the northern side of the island of Jamaica in a parish called St. Anne, and started out in Discovery Bay actually, but spent most of my years in a little town on the main highway going from between Ocho Rios to Montego Bay called Salem. And that is where everything really started for me. I finished high school in Jamaica. I spent some years at the University of the West Indies on the Mona campus. And then I transferred to complete a degree in civil engineering technology at Rochester Institute of Technology in upstate New York, Rochester, New York. And then I went back home and worked in engineering, in particular construction engineering. Worked on a few projects on the North Coast, mainly in Montego Bay. And then after about 3 years, I thought it was time to go back to school and do some more studies in civil engineering, and came back to the States and did a master's in engineering management. And around that time, the construction industry was booming, as it ever is in Florida. So I stayed in Florida, worked on some projects there, and then went back to school. And this time, I thought I was going to further my studies and my career in urban planning. But that was not to be for many reasons. And so I pursued a doctorate in public administration. And typically when you do a doctorate, folks think you're going to teach. I'll be honest with you, I had no other ideas. I thought I was maybe would end up in government, working again in the field of urban planning with government, public administration, that kind of a thing. But I ended up really getting into academia. And that's where I've been for, I would say, maybe the last 20 years or so. And it has been a fulfilling, rewarding journey. I've been here at Empire State University for 15 years. So I moved to New York in 2010 and have really, I guess you could say, deepened my career in academia here.
And had you not done that, we would not have met. We probably would not have met. And you would not have been my savior all along the way. We talk about people who enter our lives in the Nadine, before we get into all of this, serious talk. People who enter our lives at different moments in time, right? And sometimes you don't recognize the value of their contribution in the moment, or the why you come across people. But I know my story, I know your story a little bit. And had you not gone into academia, so I'm sorry, God told you to go into academia, because that's where I met you. And while I was going through my journey and my study and my Ph.D, you were indeed a fortress for me. I know that much, right? Our joke is what? The statistical significance? That was not supposed to come up so early, Dr. Nads. That was supposed to be a later conversation, maybe.
Look, it's your podcast. You get to run it however you choose, and let the spirit lead, as they would say.
Let the spirit lead. I love it. I love it. So with that said, though, it is in that space that when I met you, I was on this journey to really explore this notion of leadership agility, right? The importance of flexibility in thinking, emotional intelligence, decision making that is not just your typical, right? Because when you're in the leadership space, by virtue of even the position, it requires that you have a higher level of cognition. And it's not just the thinking, it's also in the behaviors, because a lot of times individuals, while they can think it, they don't know how to execute it. And, you met me in a space where behavioral and cognitive agility was at the forefront and continues to be at the forefront of my messaging and my work and what I do. And, we shared some real interesting and some important conversations and did some good work around that particular topic. So Dr. Nads, talk to our audience today about what does leadership agility mean for you? What does that look like in Dr. Wedderburn's space?
Of course, I knew you were going to ask me this, so I've been thinking about it. And again, I really have to give you credit for introducing me to this idea of agile leadership. And you're right, we've had many conversations about this. I've learned a lot through you and your work on what you've come to coin as unorthodox leadership. And, having thought of all of that in preparation for our conversation today, I suppose to me, leadership agility has to do with guiding and empowering individuals, right? Or teams. I remember that your dissertation work has a lot to do with team leadership, right? And you're right, we worked on that definition a lot, the notion of collective leadership and team leadership and so on. But at the heart of it, leadership agility to me has a lot to do with guiding and empowering individuals to thrive in complex, and changing environments. That's where the agility piece comes in, right? And we know the only constant is change. So the leadership to guide and to empower and to mentor, if you will, individuals and teams has to be responsive to these changing and complex environments in which they're expected to perform, right? And as you do that, I think you also enable a sense of autonomy and agency within the individuals that you are responsible for, and therefore help them create a culture of learning, right? And this is gonna kind of take me to my own journey, if you will, which I'm happy to get into a little bit more detail, right, as we talk. But again, it's the ability to guide and empower individuals to thrive in this complex and changing world, while we enable the sense of autonomy and agency and create a culture of learning. And that then enables them to perform effectively and deliver, right? Deliver value. So much of leadership happens, it seems, in this sort of business oriented context. And so when we talk about, well, who is the customer, right? When we talk about delivering effectively, often we're thinking about the customer, right? But in my mind, the customer is whoever you're called to serve at any given point in time. So in my case, in academia, in as much as we don't like to frame these notions in this way, the student is a customer. Sometimes for me, right? Because I am called to deliver this product, if you will, of education to the student. But sometimes the administrators are my customers too, because I also have a responsibility to deliver on the policies and the guidelines, if you will, that the institution has set, right? And in a larger context, Empire State University is a state university. So it's an institution for public education. And so more broadly speaking, I have a responsibility to deliver this product of higher education to the public, right? And therefore answer to my responsibility to the state, to the administrators, and to the students. So you see where the complexities come in and the changing environment. And we know that public education is constantly changing. So, that agility in leadership for me has to be responsive there, while I empower students, particularly, to learn and to take ownership of their education.
Well said. Well said. And, interestingly enough, while we may not necessarily have been able to name it in our path, right? Because you can look back and you can see, agility in action, I'm sure, way before you got to Empire, right? Way before you started on, the journey of your work, and you may not have been able to name it or didn't name it. It wasn't important to name it at the time. Was there a moment in time or, throughout your journey where you recognized the importance of this sort of mindset as a leader, agile mindset, and recognized how critically important it was? And maybe it was, an example, something probably happened and you realized, you had to pivot. Talk to us about that. If there was a moment in time when you realized just how important this was as part of your leadership.
Thank you for that question. So like I said, I've been at this for 15 years now. So just about everything at this point in my journey is centered on those 15 years. I didn't know this would ever happen. A day would ever come when I am in New York longer than I was in Florida. But so it is. And so, this has really become a big part of who I am, as it were. And I would say that the notion of agility in leadership came to me when I started this job, right? Just some 15 years ago, like I said. So to give you a little bit more information, detail, I primarily work with adults who come back to school to get a bachelor's degree, an undergraduate degree. And typically the drive behind that return to college, as it were, or coming to school for many for the first time, the drive behind that is to satisfy some personal goals or professional goals or both, right? I often hear from students who say, this is something I've always wanted to do. You know, I've raised a family and now I've decided to come back to do this for myself, right? For many, it is a way of opening doors for them professionally to maybe to move up in their career or begin a new career, as it were, right? So there's always this mix of personal and professional goals that drives the students. And so what the model of education here is to enable students to seek credit through their work experience and to have that work experience be evaluated for college credit that can work towards their degree, right? So a typical undergraduate degree, bachelor's degree is 120, 124 credits. And so students are able to use some of their work experience, have that experience evaluated and count towards the 120, 124 credits, right? Well, of course, you know, this is a non-traditional approach, if you will.
Where was Empire when I was looking for a bachelor's degree?
This is it. And me, right? This is the same thing, right? So that's exactly the point I'm making, because now I had to ensure that I developed the skills, right? First, the mindset to accept the idea that work experience can be evaluated and converted into college credit. Yes, right? And so it required me to develop those skills, to learn the system, to understand, well, what is this model all about, to enable me then to pass on that confidence, if you will, in the model, right? And ensure that the level of rigor that happens with this credit for prior learning, as it is called, right, is commensurate with higher education, right? So I'm talking about someone who's coming from a very traditional environment, right? Where, like we learn that coursework, you get coursework in the classroom, you take the courses for 15 weeks, you pass or you fail, you get the credit, and you keep moving, and you amass your number of credits towards that ultimate goal of the degree, right? And so it took me some time to really learn and appreciate this, and therefore instill that confidence and empower students to accept as well, because many of them too have no idea what value they bring to their education through their own life experiences, right? And so I had to become agile, as it were, in making sure that I was able to deliver on the policies, right, of the institution, and also pass on to students that your knowledge matters, not only the coursework that you do, but through your work experience and other life experiences, right? And so as adult learners, often they come with many responsibilities, as you can well imagine, family, right, full-time jobs, and so on, that are competing for their time. And for me, when I think about how I am able to empower, going back to that definition that I gave you, if you will, of agile leadership, empower students and enable their autonomy, right? That is at the core. You asked about, when did I know it was central to what I do? That ability to be able to inspire and empower students is definitely at the core of how I get these full-time working family leaders, as it were, adults, to make meaning of their education and see the value in their education through their own experiences.
And something you said that I'm going to piggyback on for just a minute, because you realize that sort of agile mindset, the shift started with you. The shift had to start with you. And you're absolutely right in the sense that we grew up with, and we're not unlike many others, right, who grew up in an environment where it was all about the structure, and this is the plan. You do not deviate from the plan. And I have to say kudos to Empower. I don't even know that I knew that. As you're talking, I'm just so amazed at the fact that that has not really taken ground and more people are doing this kind of a model because there are many people out here who have been working their entire life in industries, have garnered all this knowledge, have all this information, have all these skills, and they can't translate it to a degree. They have to go start all over, like the kid coming out of high school,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But the mind shift that you're talking about, it started with you. It started with you letting go of all of your preconceived notions about what teaching and learning or what a degree process should look like. Until you do that, you could not transfer that to empowering your students who now needed the awakening. I want to call it the awakening, right?
You're absolutely right. Yes.
Is that not happening every day in organizations, Dr. Nats? Because people who are still stuck and unable to step into that agile space, they struggle. They cannot empower people because they don't know how to make the shift themselves.
Right. That's right. And I'll say it wasn't easy, right? You're absolutely right. So there's a whole process of unlearning that has to happen, right? Because the acceptance is key. First, you have to accept these ideas as just as worthy as the quote unquote traditional ideas, right? And then you have to begin to learn what it means to be able to deploy the ideas, right? So that took some time. Acceptance, as you know, Shernette, is not easy. No matter what situation we find ourselves in, right? Highs and lows. Oftentimes we are afraid to accept because it means that we're going to perhaps look at things differently, right? Accepting can be really challenging, right? And so that had to happen. But I tell you, once I accepted the idea of this credit for prior learning, and I put myself in the position of the students, right? So you remember I said that I started out in engineering and I ended up in teaching, right? At the university level, right? There's a lot of knowledge that I would have gained leading up to that point. And so it is with the students who I encounter, right? Each and every student is different. And their journeys prior to meeting me, those journeys are different. They are unique to every single student. So can you imagine the disservice I would be doing to those students if I was hesitant or apprehensive or unbelieving, right, in this idea of them getting credit for their work experience? And to this point, I don't know, I've never really counted, but I must have crossed paths with at least 1,000 students, right? And by the way, let me tell you, this is in addition to teaching. So the opportunities come for me to speak into their ability and to their potential, even in the teaching moment, right? So like half the job is this advising, mentoring role, and then the other half is a teaching role, right? But every now and again, even in the classroom, I'll encounter a student who has a question about sociology, for example. And in that question, they might say, because I'm looking to work in, I don't know, human services, right? And it gives me an opportunity to say, have you ever thought about your work experience, right? Adding value, because there's value in it, to your degree, right? As we kind of work out these social theories or, right, the sociological principles, all that kind of stuff, right? Because what you're telling me, what you're sharing with me about your experience that you've already had in human services, in this social context, as it were, has application for your degree. So I'm saying that to say, just imagine if I was reticent in encouraging students to think about their education that way, I would have really let down quite a few. And once I recognize that there is power in students and value in their experiences, I couldn't right? I just couldn't. I had to find a way for me to take ownership of that responsibility that I had, and then therefore pass it on to the students.
Amazing, amazing. I see this mode all day long in different organizations, and it's interesting. It doesn't matter whether you are in tertiary education, it doesn't matter whether you're in K-12, it doesn't matter whether you're in nonprofit
Yep.
industry. You have staff, individuals working for you that come with different levels of experiences, different levels of skills, and it is important that as an agile leader, you know how to recognize that because
Right.
everybody will not have the same repertoire of
That's
skills,
right. That's right.
Nadine. That they simply won't.
Mm-mm.
How do you, as the leader, now capture what they do bring to the table as a value add, like you said, and make that work not only for the benefit of the college or yourself or the class, but also for themselves,
That's
right?
it. Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, people think about agile leadership and, yeah, we don't use it often enough. I don't think we use the word often enough. So sometimes you say it and people may have some kind of a misunderstanding of what the word or, what the phrase or the concept, or just the mode of being, because that's what I call it, really means. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about agility and agile leadership?
So, such a good question. I'm glad you asked that because, again, in thinking about this, I am amazed at how much agility in leadership is associated with the tech world.
Yes.
Right? So, that seems to be the current angle that people are thinking about. And it is so far from the truth. It is relevant
Right.
in the software development and so on, but it is
Right.
not only applicable
Correct.
to software development, right? And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions that comes up now when people think about agile leadership, right? It is just as you said, there those core principles of empowerment, of advocacy, agency, right? Those core principles of agility. We talked about teams as well, right? So there's a way that even in leading teams, you have to foster collaboration, right? And again, if you don't know who your team members are, it becomes hard to do that, right? So you have to really get to know your team members. But those core principles of empowerment, let's say, collaboration, flexibility, right? Agility, adaptability, all of that to me can be applied across various professional domains, right? And even in the home, right? But we're speaking about the organizations, right? Because I really don't think that anyone area has the monopoly on agile leadership, right? It's what I even say to students, again, going back to that, being able to recognize those abilities and those skills and knowledge that they bring, right? That in many ways they're practicing it in different contexts. And so that's a myth I would really speak to about agility right now, is this idea that it's only relevant for software development. Absolutely not, right? The core principles can be applied across various domains.
I'm so glad you said that. You saw me trying to give you virtual high fives, right?
Sure.
Because you are absolutely right. And again, we're not, dismissing the relevance there. We're not
Absolutely not.
the fact that it's actually a relevant, discipline that's practiced in the tech world, and there's a lot of science to it, right? But in spaces of leadership, no matter what industry you're in, the science is just the science of people. The science is just the science of thinking. It's the science of behaviors. It's the science of how you process. It's the science of how you, really navigate change, especially in fast and dynamic environments. Many of us are creatures of habit, Dr. Nads. You know this.
Absolutely.
And when we have to shift, it's interesting because we talk about change being the only constant ever, right? Why is it still so difficult for us? What is it? We know it. We know it. We know that the core of what we do as leaders, but some of us have such a difficult time
Sure.
really embracing and navigating that. Why is that?
So it's a good question. I think we just generally like what's familiar, because what's familiar is what's easy
Yes.
for us, right? And so that's the default that we will always want to go to. What is comfortable, what's familiar, because that's just easy. You can just slip right back into that mode. Change challenges us, right? And I think that's perhaps another myth, if you will, about agile leadership, that that it's kind of a free-for-all. Yeah. Right? Because this agility, flexibility thing, sounds sort of kind of wishy-washy, if you will. And again, even this idea of credit for prior learning, when you first introduce it to students, a lot of students are resistant to it because they can't believe that something so open and so flexible could be so important and valuable, right? And so the tendency is, I'll just go take the course, because that is what they've been taught to believe is the quote unquote easier or more direct route. And I would say that agile leadership is not free for all. It's not wishy-washy. To your point about science, it is very structured and logical, right? And in practicing agile leadership, what I have found, again, even though maybe I didn't know that's what I was doing, right, but setting a clear vision for your team and for yourself, right? Setting goals, these mileposts, if you will, that will tell you if you are accomplishing your vision and your mission, right? Organizational words, right? And then putting in place those boundaries, the frameworks in which we are able to operate, right? So you have all this freedom, as it were, right? So I like to say, be clear about the what, right? And leave room for the how. That is how you empower folks to figure it out, right? Here's our vision. Here are our goals. Here are the boundaries, the framework within which we will work. You go figure out the how, right? You decide how we're going to get there. And again, with your teams, each and every person has a contribution to make that is valuable to deciding, right, what that how will be. Right? After some talking, after some collaborating, after some listening with your leadership and your guidance, right? Sort of as the quote unquote expert in the policy. I always tell students, I'm not an expert on what you know. You are your expert. But I'm an expert in showing you how within the framework of the institution, you can bring this knowledge to bear valuably on your degree. Right? And then we'll talk. I listen, I try to. I'm certainly not claiming to be the perfect mentor here at all. But there's a measure of listening in that collaborative space that is so important. So, and giving folks the opportunity to share what they know, right? And how they've come to know what they know. And then you establish the what, then allow them to figure out the how. Right? If that is even a choice and a chance for them to do, right? But it's definitely not without structure. Going back to, that question, there's absolutely a science. So when I think of science, I really just think of logic, right? What are the structures that are in place to keep us on track in that rational and systematic way?
Vision focused, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Vision focused. And you're absolutely, such a great point, because a lot of times people will, confuse the agility for, like you said, being too flexible, wishy-washy. Today you want to, no. It really is being able to take a 500-foot look down at your situation, your circumstances, seeing where it is, and being able to make strategic decisions about the how, like you said. Nothing has changed about the what, right? Yeah. And that's where we get stuck a lot. A big part of my work is that whole, okay, we understand what agility is in thinking. How do you now translate that to the how? How do you now act
That's
So this
right.
is where behavioral agility comes in. We can get stuck in cognition all day long. We're cognitively agile. Give me a problem, I can tell you how to solve it. But how do I really execute it? How
That's
do I
right.
act on it? How do I change my behaviors? Which a lot of times we're stuck on the behaviors.
Sure.
It's an issue. We're like jobbers. We're spinning our wheels. We know what we want to do, but we can't get it done because we're not behaviorally agile. Which kind of leads me to another question.
Mhm.
You're the expert. I'm going to call you the expert, right? You're the expert, Dr. Nets. Share with us some ways that leaders can begin, some examples, practical ways that leaders can begin to develop this kind of agility in their thinking and in their actions.
Great. I think again, it begins with this might sound abstract, but it'll lead to the concrete, right? It really begins with a sense of reflection and personal development, right? So get to know who you are and what your responsibilities are in this environment and in this call to lead, as it were, right? And there's some humility that's involved. We have
Lots.
to,
Some or lots.
there you go, right? We have to be willing to give up some of the things that we've held on to for a long time, the unlearning that I spoke of earlier, right? And so what that means is you might have to do some training, right? You might have to seek out experts in the field who can help you with this unlearning process and this new learning process, right? And so speak to others, talk to folks who in your mind are doing well in their leadership roles, right? When I think of the leaders who I have been fortunate to have worked with and observed, there are points here and there that I can take on, right? That come back to mind, right? And every situation brings back a different leader to mind, right? But if you don't have that pool to draw on, then you're really at a disadvantage, I would say, right? So you have to be willing to learn, to relearn, and by doing so, seek help, as it were, right? In terms of the development, that professional development that we talked about, be willing to let go of control over what you know, right? And be willing to recognize the value that others bring to support you in terms of making you that effective leader, right? That's one thing. The other thing I would say that that can be helpful to leaders has a lot to do with not just learning yourself, but learning the principles of leadership, right? I know some of us are thrown into these positions, like seriously, right? With zero preparation. And it's not that we are not good people, right? And it's not that folks are not willing to do a good job at what they're in, but they don't know what they don't know. And so if you find, even when you find yourself somewhat missing out on something that you really should have, some tools that you really should have, then I would say find a way to figure out how to fill that gap, as it were, right? And then maybe lastly, I would say taught a lot about teams and collaboration and so on. Make sure that you are getting to know your team. And again, this would come, alongside even getting to know who you are as a leader, or what kind of leader you're being called to be to lead this particular team, right? Because the way you lead team A may not be how team B needs you to lead, right? And so getting to know your team, I think, and so practically that could mean calling these meetings, as it were. No, we have, but you have to do it. You just have to do the work, whatever it takes, right, to get to know your team. So then you can build those boundaries, like we talked about, right? Foster the trust that you need, right? Because we have to have a measure of trust within our team so that they're able to work together effectively and therefore carry out that vision that you would have set with and for the team, right? So there's that training, continuous development, if you will, personal reflection, getting to know you, and then also getting to know your team.
Listen, as an agile leader, it really calls for you to embrace just about every mode, every model of leadership that you can think of. And it is key that you mentioned the strategies you used in situation A may not necessarily be the same strategies that you're going to use or be successful with. Let me rephrase that. And you can use them all day long.
This is true.
They may just not work, but it's not going to be necessarily the strategies you use in B. And that's what agility is always about. We talk about fit a lot in leadership, especially in academia. We love to talk about fit, the right principal for a school, the right person for a building, well, I'm here to tell you, an agile leader will find fit.
That's right.
An agile leader is going to make it work because it's situational, and you have to be able to think through the current scenario, the current environment, the current people, because people make the environment, right? And really think through, okay, what is it that I'm going to use with this particular group to be successful? No, you don't have to take my personality and go drop me into a box where, okay, it works there. No. Agility requires, and being able to develop that requires that you are able to step into almost any situation and still be successful. That's the value of agility.
That's right. I agree 100%. Couldn't agree more. And this is why it's so important to have that toolbox, as we like to say, and you don't develop that on your own. You just don't. There are skills that you need, strategies, information that you don't have. So you have to go out and find it. And first you have to know that you don't have it, right? And that is, again, is where, to me, that sense of reflection is so important. You have to be willing to sit with yourself, that humility again, right? And say, I feel like I'm struggling with this. I'm not even sure exactly what it is. Let me go talk to Dr. Grant and see if we can work something out that brings me to a clearer idea of what it is that I need to improve, right, my ability here in this particular context with this particular team, right? And then once you do that, you go about it. You go about getting that tool, adding it to your toolbox, and you keep developing. By the way, it's a journey. It's an ongoing journey. That's what I was getting at when I said, I didn't learn this thing overnight, and I have not stopped learning, right? I also believe in lifelong learning as an academic, I will say, right? So I'm constantly working on finding new ways to inspire and empower individuals, right? And it can get overwhelming, I will admit, because we are in the information age and we are bombarded with so many things, right? So many pieces of information. So we have to also be able to, and this is again where the science comes in, rationalize, right? Recognize just what you need, take that on, add that to your toolkit, recognize that that's not the end. Not because you got tool A means that, I don't need any more tools, right? It's an ongoing journey. Stay open and be willing to continue learning. That's something that just came to mind. Thank you for bringing that up.
And just do it, right? Like the Nike commercial said, just do it. Just do it. You have to be willing to want to do it. Right? And just do it. And some of us need a little bit of hand holding in that process. It happens. None of us are 100% proficient at everything. No way. And even the most agile of leaders have things that they need to, work on and continue to sharpen their skills. And, that's really what it's all about. And just that awareness alone is key to developing that agile mindset. Where is it that I struggle? What do I need? What are
Right.
the resources that I need to pull in to make sure that I can step out of my comfort zone or my familiar, right? My
Mhm.
familiar zone into spaces unknown, spaces uncharted, do different things, and still be successful at it. And with that, and we're gonna wrap up soon. I have a couple of quick fire questions for you, Dr. Nads, that might
All
be
right.
for our audience. But talk a little bit about your transformation, your pivoting, your journey. What was it again? Urban planning, engineering,
Mhm.
academic. People listen to you sometimes, and they have no. Sometimes they have no idea what your journey's been like. And there are other people who are going. There are people who are going through transition or
Mhm.
pivoting.
Mhm.
And you and I know firsthand about transitioning and pivoting, right? And they think that they're in this space all by themselves. And I would dare to say that a part of developing agility in yourself, in your self leadership, in your own mindset, is really embracing not just change in terms of what you have to do in the workplace, but change as it relates to life changes.
Mhm.
When you go from Jamaica, from urban planning, you go from a medical technologist into education, and then
Yes.
it's changes. Drop some words of encouragement on the audience from the Dr. Nads, because people are going through transition, have gone through transition, are in the space, and just want to hear that there is actually a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Indeed. Indeed. Wow. Wow. And a lot of this is going to sound very cliche, but what can we say? We're all guided by cliches, really.
Yep.
But the first thing that comes to mind is never forget your why.
Mm-hmm.
What motivates you?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing this? Why? Never forget your why. Stay grounded in that thing that tells you that this addition, this enhancement to my life is going to make me feel better about myself and add value to those around me and the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If that is what motivates you, if however you frame your why, whatever words you put to it, if that is the core of your why, don't ever forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever forget your why. What is it that motivates you, right? Because that's the anchor.
Mm-hmm.
That is what is going to keep you. The winds will come and they will blow you, right? The waves will come and they will shift you, right? And no one said anything was gonna be easy. As we like to say, life is complicated.
Life,
Life,
life be lifing.
it always does, right? Life does what life does, you know. But you can come out on the other end. And believe in your why will tell you that you will come out on the other end, right? Push through. And then also surround yourself with people who can keep you anchored to your why.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be a lot of people. And those people, again, might change from time to time, depending how long that period of transition is for you. But the sooner you're able to recognize those people who enable you and enable your why and enable you to stay true to that are the people that you will want to stick close to and have around you, right? And the ones who don't, the sooner you recognize that those people are not good for you, find ways of putting distance
Mm-hmm.
between
Mm-hmm.
you and those people, right? And again, it doesn't have to be a lot of people. And it might change from time to time, from season to season, but surround yourself with people who can keep you encouraged to stay true to your why.
Can I drop the mic?
Please have at it.
Drop the mic. Dr. Nadine, before we wrap up on our conversation about agility, I have a couple of quick questions for you.
Sure.
Tell me, what's one very good book that every leader should read?
My go-to book, I like that question, is Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown.
I bet you she's very agile.
Well, listen, the book itself and her principles that she espouses in the book have to do with recognizing that change comes in many forms, and we have to stay flexible and open to recognizing that. So she goes from philosophy to history to nature, right? To show us that change is a natural part of this life journey that we're on. None of us will escape change in some form or shape. And so the emergent strategy that she puts forward is that strategy to cope with change is also constantly emerging. And she really opens up on that in the book. Yeah, I love that book, especially when we're talking about agility. Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown.
And we'll drop it in the bio for the folks who want to go ahead and be reminded of that. One leadership habit that you swear by.
Get to know the names of your people and address them by their names.
Isn't that a given? Wait. You lost me for a minute there.
Well.
All right. Okay.
You asked me, right? And I'm telling you.
I did. We learned. Yes.
To know the names of the people with whom you work and address them by their names. Please, 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 please.
Amen. I'll say no more. One leadership lesson you had to learn the hard way.
I'm gonna go back to knowing the difference between the how and the what. Really and truly, right? So, and just really quickly, why I think about that is when I started out in this teaching thing, right? They tell you, well, okay, let me put it back this way. Let me start out by saying, as a teacher, and I call myself a teacher, students rise to the level of expectations that you set for them. Don't you ever discount a student by your expectations. In other words, don't think that student A cannot achieve this or student B can surpass this, right? So, right, those assumptions we want to disavow. So when I started out, I learned that very quickly based on the notion of setting expectations. And I would kind of thinking that I'm being accommodating and helpful, right? I would adapt or modify expectations, right? Yes, right? And I learned the hard way that it is not so much about being adaptable or modifying, because I want to keep this in the sense of agility, right? But recognizing that there's a difference between what the expectations are and how you have students meet those expectations, right? And I think I was confusing both. And so what I learned quickly, but in a very hard way, that knowing the difference between the how and the what when it comes to expectations that I set for myself and for the students, I had to be clear in what the expectations are and be consistent in having myself and the students meet those expectations. So that's the what. Then how they did that, right? So whether they whether they accomplish, let's say, the learning outcomes by a PowerPoint presentation or a 15-page essay or a combination of both or something that I perhaps have never thought about. Yeah. Means that I allowed them to develop their how, but never adapting or changing the what of the expectations. Right? So that's a lesson I learned. Know the difference between the what and the how of expectations that I set for myself and for others. Yes. And be clear in those expectations, because I think where I ran into trouble was they weren't clear. I'll be ready to admit that, right? Be clear in what they are and consistent in ensuring that those expectations are met. And so that comes even back to, what do we tell ourselves, right? What messages are we leading with, beginning with ourselves, right? Because I'm sure we talk about this a lot too, Sharnette. We are so quick to shift up our expectations to make room for others. And unfortunately, often we disappoint ourselves.
Correct. And
And
that's where staying focused on the what is truly, truly, truly important.
Absolutely. I thought I was being accommodating, flexible, and I was in a way, right? Giving room to students to sort of do what they will with the expectations.
Right.
Yeah. But that's not really the point, because then a big part of the agility too is holding people accountable. Right. So if I'm going to be clear about the expectations that I set for myself to begin with, then I have to hold myself accountable. And then to those expectations, because now I'm clear about what they are. How I go about it is a different thing. And the same is true for those around us, those with whom we work or to whom we are responsible, is how I like to think about things as well, right? In being clear about the difference between the what and the how, then we are also clear about the accountability piece that we can hold others to.
And agile leaders absolutely value accountability.
That's right.
There is no ifs, ands, or buts.
That's right.
About accountability when it comes to agility. We talked about it earlier. This is not a free for all. It's not right. about it's not about going where the wind goes. It is exactly not that. Which probably leads to one of my questions. For you, one word. Well, maybe not one word. However you decide to frame that. I'm gonna be agile and allow you to flexibility.
Good.
Okay? Agile leadership for you is ultimately about, finish that sentence.
Empowering, adaptability, and openness to change.
Beautiful. Empowering, adaptability, and open to change.
Openness.
No matter where you are in your leadership journey, that should be your today.
Yes.
Because it's a constant. It's a constant. Dr. Nads, share one word for us that captures your leadership philosophy today. After your entire journey and everything that you have, that's going to be hard. Let me see what you come up with. Put it into one word for me.
Awareness.
Expound.
I have to be aware. I have to lead on purpose and consciously. And so in order to do that open-mindedness that I talked about just now, right, has to be a core value that I draw on every single time I'm faced with a situation where I have to lead, right? And then I become more aware. And so awareness is a guiding principle for me. Stay open-minded and aware so that I can meet people openly, hear them, pull on the bits and pieces that I have learned along the way through this awareness, able to, in order to, sorry, be able to empower them, encourage them, motivate them, get them to their ultimate goal.
We're doing the applause, right? I didn't drop the mic on this one. I'm just doing the applause. I have nothing more to add. I have nothing more to add. I love the perspective. You are right. It absolutely leads to everything else that needs to happen. We have to take the blinders off. And I think once we take the blinders off, it is really a vehicle by which we can govern not only ourselves, our work. When we are good at what we do, the organization thrives, the people we serve thrive. It's a ricochet effect. It just happens. It's magic. It is magic. So
I agree.
That was amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Nadine Wedderburn, thank you so much for taking some time today to join me on this episode of Leadership Plus with Dr. G. You certainly left us with a lot to think about, including myself. And I'm hoping that our audiences will find value. I know they will find value. If anybody would like to reach out to Dr. Nadine, I will share her, with her permission, I will share what I can in the bio. We'll put some information out about her, because you do this work outside as well, and you speak, you do some things where you actually work outside of Empire. Is that appropriate to say?
Certainly.
Because those words of wisdom can't just stay. They just can't stay in the cold in New York. They can't just be in New York, right? And I would really encourage anyone who finds value in, what you have to bring and share. Maybe you'll be back in urban planning next week. No?
Stay open.
Stay open. Stay open. Stay open, right?
Absolutely.
And of course, to my audience, you all know that, as we talked about today, sometimes we don't all have the tools in our toolkits, but there are tons of opportunities and individuals who can help you do the work that you're trying to do. Change is not easy for anyone. It's never easy, but it's important, and it is a necessity. So if you are needing help and trying to figure out your next move, how to start to really hone your agile skills, I encourage you to reach out to me. Of course, go check out our website, www.unorthodoxleadership.org, and reach out, because we would love to work with you on this journey of change, transformation, and most importantly, growth. You don't change or transform unless you're growing, right? So thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Nadine. Thank you so much for being my guest. It was such a pleasure. And of course, I look forward to connecting outside of this space. Maybe when the rain has stopped. We'll see how that goes. I may have to come up to New York. We'll see how that works. And connecting around the work, the real work, the work that really drives people and drives organization. With that
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me too, Dr. Grant. It's always a pleasure talking with you. I wish you continued success with your podcast and all that you're doing. You too are a light. You continue to shine and bring such brightness in the lives of those that you touch, that you encounter. And I just want you to continue to have that level of success and that impact in the world. And of course, you're welcome to New York anytime, winter, summer, spring, or fall.
We're gonna do the winter time. We're not doing the winter. We're gonna pass on the winter options.
That's all right.
We could probably go skiing. Who knows, right?
Well, I'm still a little girl from St. Anne, Jamaica. I'm not sure about the skiing.
That doesn't change.
That doesn't change.
I know. That doesn't change for either of us. So, Dr. Nadine, thank you so much. You are amazing. You're awesome. You continue to do amazing work and touch lives in ways that, people don't always see, but people like myself, and I could name the lines of people who will call Dr. Nadine tomorrow if they just need a thought partner and somebody to help them think through strategy and just talk it through, or work it through. You are that person, and I want you to know I know I speak on behalf of a lot of folks, appreciate you. Empire is lucky to have you. They're blessed to have you, and every student you touch is blessed to have you for the level of cognition and agility that you bring to your work in making sure that they can be successful. So thank you again for joining me. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to tune out for now. You all have a great rest of, whether it's day, night, morning, wherever you are. Please like, subscribe, and most importantly, I ask that you share these episodes, because there's definitely someone out there who could benefit from the insights that are shared. It may not be you, but it could be somebody you know, and we want to make sure that this can be valuable and really reach the ears and the hearts of the people who truly need it. All right? So like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you next time on Leadership Plus with Dr. G. Ciao.